Hi, everybody. It's Janet here from the TIPS team. And today we're going to talk a little bit about iPads. A number of schools have been purchasing iPads, whether for their admin teams or for teachers on staff. And some of the things that our team looks at with iPads is we look at how to use iPads for assessment, how to basically get around on your iPad, and the difference between using iPads as teachers, administrators, and as students. And what I wanted to do today is really take a step back and look at some absolute basics of, I've got a new iPad, how can I set up my iPad so that it's streamline my workflow, not give me a whole lot of other little bit pieces of things that I have to work with and thus interrupt my workflow. So what I'll do first of all is just share my screen with you. Okay, this document here gives you a little overview of what I wanted to talk about today. I'm going to be looking at a number of different things, and I'd like to move quite quickly through them. So you've got your new iPad. The first thing you're going to need to do is check your iPad settings. So I have an iPad here that I'm just going to log into as I'm chatting. And within that iPad, I am going to show you up here. Let's move these screens over so you can see both of these together. So I've got this screen and this screen. Something like that. Whoops. Okay, so on my iPad, I'm going to go first of all to the iPad settings. And within the settings, you're going to need an Apple ID in order to download apps from the App Store. So I'm assuming that this is a teacher or school admin managed iPad where you have that flexibility to download the apps yourself. If you set up your iPad initially without an Apple ID, you can set up an Apple ID at any time. That's on the left here, just under, I'm just scrolling down about halfway down the page there. There's a link to iTunes and App Store, and that's where you can set up that Apple ID. The second thing I'd like to do is just show you the Touch ID. So down the settings, down the left-hand side here on your iPad, if you click into Touch ID and passcode, you enter your password, which I'm not going to do. And within that section, you can set up Touch ID. It has you use your finger and touch on the little button at the bottom of your iPad several times, and eventually it will recognize that fingerprint as yours and help to get you quickly past where you have to log in that code every time you enter your iPad. So in terms of streamlining your workflow, you're having a conversation with a student and your iPad is locked up on you, much easier to be able to just touch your iPad with your finger than to have have it type in your password like that. The next thing I wanted to show you on your settings page is the notifications. So that's up near the top. Here's my notifications. And you'll see that I have a number of apps on here. Some of these were the apps that came with the iPad itself. Others are apps that I've added to it. And within each of those apps, so if I go to my Gmail, for example, I can decide whether I want to allow notifications or not. Now, if you're a teacher or a school admin, and if you're going to be streaming what appears on your iPad up onto a screen for other people to see, maybe you don't want those email notifications to appear in front of everybody. So that's where you can switch those notifications off altogether like that, or within each particular app. So there's your notifications. Third of all, working with the screen itself. So I'm just going to click back to my main page on my iPad here. Whatever you add to your iPad, you can just drag your finger across the bottom of your iPad and it'll take you to subsequent pages on your iPad itself. So you'll see the way I've set this iPad up. Here's my main page of apps. I have another page with a few more apps, and on the third page I have a folder of apps, and if I click into that, my Apple apps. So I find for the way that I use the iPad in terms of streamlining my own workflow, these Apple apps are going to distract me because all of our mail is through Google Mail. I don't want to hook it to my Apple Mail. My Apple Mail has been put away in this folder. Same for all of those other apps that you see there. So I thought I would show you how to create a folder that you can move apps into like that. So you'll see I have another on my front page. I have some of the Apple apps. The clock is still there. My Apple Photos is there. The camera is still there. So you'll see I have a number of Apple apps there, but it has a very Google focus now on this page. In fact, it has such a Google focus that all of the Google apps I wanted to have didn't fit on that front page. So I've added another folder on here called More Google, where I have some Google apps that I don't use as often, but I still want to use and have on my front page. So if I want to take an app out of a folder, all I do is hold my finger on it for some time until it gets all wobbly like that. I can just drag it out of that folder, and now that app is sitting free. Any other app can be moved around on the page while it's in that position, so I can just move things anywhere. If I want to add two apps together into a folder, so let's take Google Sheets and Music, we'll put them, I drag Sheets on top of the other. Now they've been put into a folder together. So that's how you move apps around on the page. It's how you put your apps into a folder. Maybe I want to take this whole folder and move it into this folder. I can't do that, but I can take the apps out of that folder. I'll just clean it up again. And if I wanted, I could then put an app in a separate folder. To get out of that wobbly place, there's the button at the very bottom of your iPad. If I click that, now we're back to the way it is at the beginning. So if I wanted to move this folder to another page, same thing, I hold on it, drag it to the side, and now I've got that folder sitting on the last page. Okay, next we're going to look at how to take a photo. So of course your camera is right here. Whoops, camera. And when I'm in my camera, I'm not in like the most scenic location right now. When you're in your camera, you can take a photo. If you drag up and down on the photo itself, you can choose whether you're creating a photo, a square, and I'm looking at the right here. There's a photo, a square, a panorama, a video, a slow-mo, or a time-lapse. So you think this Photos app this camera app is built into the iPad itself, the implications it has for recording what's happening in our classrooms and with our students in terms of gathering evidence of learning. It's an incredible app to be able to use and to use the best you can. For the panorama, for example, all you do is click, take the photo, and you can just drag it around for as long as you want to, and that panorama is placed right there. So that's your Photos app. Now, let's say a student has taken a photo and you would like that student to hand that photo into you. I'm going to pull up another iPad here and show you how that works. Okay, so I now have, it's a little bit hard for you to see on the small screen, but I have two iPads up here now. So if I go into my photos, and so I'm now on my first iPad. If I scroll up with my finger from the very bottom of my iPad screen, so below the image, if I scroll up, and this isn't showing on the screen in front of you, so you'll have to just try it on yours and see. There's a little menu that comes up, and there's an option that says AirDrop. If you click on AirDrop, make sure that you've selected everyone, And on my other iPad, I'm also going to make sure that AirDrop says everyone. And then now on this first iPad where I have a photo, at the very top of my screen, there is a little box with a little arrow out of it. So that's to share. It's right next to the heart. So if I click on my little box with an arrow to share, it says AirDrop, share instantly with people nearby. So I can now go like nearby to my AirDrop. Wait a minute. My photos. And AirDrop. And what will happen, and it hasn't happened here, and this is because I should have thought this through. I've logged on with the same identity onto two machines, so it's not working. But up on the top, so right in this little box, the other people's iPads that are connected to AirDrop will appear, and all you do is click on the person you want to share your photo with or other photos, and it will automatically share that photo with that other person. So that's the AirDrop. I'm going to log off this one here. Okay, next thing is with Google Drive. You'll see that on this iPad, I have mostly Google Apps installed. If you're with Edmonton Public Schools and you have installed Drive and or Calendar and or Mail to your iPad, you will be asked to include or to install the district device policy. This is not a frightening thing, it's a secure thing. What the district device policy does is it lets you keep, it lets you be able to stay in control of your iPad. If your iPad is lost, you can contact district technology and it can wipe the iPad for you. And in that way, it can keep you, it can keep any data that's on that iPad out of the hands of people who shouldn't have access to that data. So when you first install those apps, the first of those apps that you install, just follow the prompts and it will install that device policy for you. The beautiful thing about installing Google Drive, and I'm going to show you here, I've placed my Google Drive. Let's log back in here again. So with my Google Drive, if I click into the top left where the three bars are up here, I can go down to my settings. And inside settings, one thing, you can set a separate passcode lock for your Google Drive. So if you are going to be sharing your iPad with a colleague, perhaps you want to lock up your drive, that's something that you are able to do. You can choose whether there's notifications on. Under Photos, which is the one I'd like to show you now, I have my iPad set to automatically put my Google Photos into a folder in my drive. So what that means is if I'm taking pictures of student work or other photos at school, I don't have to think about having those be uploaded to my Google Drive. They automatically appear in my Google Drive in my Google Photos. I also have the Google Photos app installed. Oops, get out of there. And what's nice about the Google Photos app itself is that it, within the settings here, you can also choose whether you want to have, for example, similar faces grouped together. Like, it gives you more options for controlling your photos. So Google Photos I recommend, Drive I recommend for sure. If you have your Drive installed, also within Drive, you can set up a folder for each of your classes. And then within that folder, you can set up a folder for each of your students. So, so for example, I have a class called Janet's class, and then I have sample folders for Johnny and Karen, where I've set up folders for each of those students within that class. Then if I take photos of students in that class, I can move those photos directly into the students' folders. Or the students can take photos on iPads themselves and they can move them into those folders themselves if those folders have been shared with them. Move this over. Okay, so as I mentioned in my handout here, Drive is probably the one. If you were only going to install one app on your iPad, let it be Drive. One other thing I forgot to mention in terms of organizing the iPad is along the bottom, so along here, what I've done is I've removed the Apple apps that I'm not going to be using so that they're not distracting, and I've quite literally just taken the Google apps from here and move them into here. And there's a maximum of 6 that you can put along the bottom. So I have my Chrome, my Hangouts, my Drive, Google Calendar, and Mail all sitting in the bottom instead of those Apple ones. So if I wanted to move it out, I would just go like that. Now it's out. I'd like to keep it here because now whichever page I'm on, those are always sitting at the bottom. Okay, other apps. You'll see that I don't have too many apps on this iPad. I think it's really important. Less is more when it comes to apps. Some of my favorite apps are Notability, which I put actually as one of my bookmarked apps in the Drive itself. And if you'd like to learn more about Notability, we can talk about that at another time. What it is a note-taking app, but you can also bring in photos and annotate on them, and it basically becomes a repository of information that you can have shared to Drive as a PDF or as a Notability file, which is complete with audio as well as the actual document itself. It's a great app. Another app that I really like is Sketch, which enables you to annotate on photos. And what I like about it is that I can go into my photos folder itself on the iPad. And if I pull up my photos, this is what I've done on this one here. Up at the top right in my iPad screen, there's a little sign that says Edit. And within that, I can click on the little button at the bottom and I can edit it in Sketch right then and there. And that lets me like write on my photo. Let's move this back. I have a list of the Google apps that I find very useful. So there's Photos, Gmail, Calendar, Slides, Docs, Translate, Hangouts, and Google+. But as I said before, install other apps. Don't overdo it. Be particularly careful if there are any apps that are looking to gather any personal information about yourself or your students. If there are any FOIP concerns, don't download it. I tend to gravitate towards the creation apps more than the consumption apps. I do have a Kindle app on here so I can read books, but I have primarily Notability, Explain Everything, and Sketch. I think are apps that allow me to do a ton of stuff, and so I'm sticking with those for now. Last but not least, AirPlay and AirServer. So AirServer is a program that actually is installed on your computer. AirPlay is, there we go, AirServer. And so I have AirServer installed on my laptop right now, which is what is streaming from my iPad to here. Obviously, I'm going to change my passcode after this session. And when I scroll up from the bottom of my page, you can see here, it's streaming at the bottom. There's my AirDrop. It's streaming to Janet's PC. If I click in here on my iPad, there are other places where I can send out the stream of what I'm trying to do. So if you're in a school and you have AirServer installed on your teacher desktop, you can take your iPad, swipe up from the bottom, and send whatever's on your screen straight out there. So say you're doing some annotation on some work using Notability, or annotating on a picture using Sketch, or simply accessing your Google Doc and have students collaborate and have all of that information from your Google Doc appear up on the smartboard in front of them. AirServer is what you're using on the computer. AirPlay is what you're using on your device. And if you have an Android device, we're excited that there is now an app available for Android in the Play Store called AirServer Connect. And that will allow you to do exactly the same thing with your Android device. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or would like to have an ethical special made on one of these topics, so we can get into more depth, please make a comment below the video, and hopefully we can help you with that too. Thanks. Have a good evening. Bye.